enough, have you?
No, absolutely not. I've only just begun, Gordon.
All right. Let's talk about Europe. Neil
Sure.
Finlay, your Brexit spokesperson, says that a second referendum on EU membership can't be ruled out. You've responded to that by saying you think it's more likely that the Tories will lose a vote on the final deal and there will be a general election at which you presumably hope Labour will sweep to power. And when Labour sweeps to power, it should do what exactly about the European Union?
Well, it depends what stage the negotiations have reached. I mean, my scenario is that I think that the deal forged by Theresa May, David Davis, Boris Johnson will be an insufficient one to satisfy the demands of the people of this country and the elected representatives of this country. And so I can see there being a voting down of the deal,
yes,
which will precipitate an election.
OK, and Labour would argue in that election campaign, and once it wins it, in your view, for what? For staying in the single market and the customs union?
Well, we've made it clear that we think it's important that tariff-free access to the single market is important because we've said that our priority is jobs, the economy, but there are also other things like environmental protection, consumer protection and workers' rights, which we want to see safeguarded in a post-Brexit UK. Right,
so does that mean you're in favour of being in the customs union, for example?
Well, I think there is a compelling case for being in the customs union.
There is?
Well, I think there is, in the sense that that would certainly provide us with a tariff-free trading area to be a part of. So I think that's got an appeal to it. But
it's not Jeremy Corbyn's view.
Well,
in fact, the whips told Labour to vote recently against a proposal to stay in the customs union.
I mean, there are issues around the timing of positions being taken, and I think that there was a proposition put to Parliament which was too premature, and that was why the Parliamentary Labour Party took a decision, not just Jeremy Corbyn but Keir Starmer and the whole of the Parliamentary Labour Party took a decision not to vote for that amendment.
Your view is stay in the customs union. What about the single market?
Well, I'm appealing for us to have access to the single market.
But not membership. You're saying stay in the customs union. What about stay in the single market?
Well, I think membership of the single market would bring with it some difficulties because there would be a membership fee to pay and we would be in a situation where we'd be presumably a member of the single market but without having full membership rights to decide what the rules of the single market were. And I don't think...
So you're against that?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily an advantageous position to be in.
There's a poll out this morning in The Observer saying 56% of likely Labour voters want Labour to back staying in both the single market and the customs union. Why so resistant to backing staying in the single market?
Well, because I think there has been a referendum in which the voice of the people has been heard. And I've consistently said I don't think it's the place for politicians to stand in the way of a decision taken by the people. And I would apply that to the 2016 referendum. I would also apply it to the 2014 referendum in Scotland.
OK. In what way is I mean, fine if you come out and if Jeremy Corbyn comes out in favour of staying in the customs union, which he hasn't done yet, but as of now, in what way is your position any different from the Tories?
Well, I mean, let me give you an example. Just before Christmas, Theresa May was asked whether or not the Working Time Directive and its provisions would be incorporated and continued in UK law after Brexit. And she refused to answer that question.
Easiest way of doing that, by the way, is to stay in the single market.
Well, no, it's currently part of UK law because it's been transposed from the European directive as regulations in the UK law. She could simply say, yes, we will maintain this provision which provides for working people a right to paid holidays, which provides for working people a limitation on the amount of working time that they have to spend each week and each month.
The Scottish Government wants powers over immigration after we leave the EU. It says Scotland has particular economic issues which mean we need more immigrants. Would you back them in that?
Well, I've got a fairly open mind on whether or not there needs to be a distinctive immigration policy for Scotland or not. I mean, it was Labour, when we were in power in the Scottish Parliament, that introduced the Fresh Talent Initiative, which was a recognition that there needed to be a nuanced approach to migration in Scotland, and that wasn't just about for the benefit of the Scottish economy.
You might be in favour of further powers over immigration.
Well, I can see there being a case to be made for a power of variation for the Scottish context. It could also be a power which, incidentally, could be extended to London, could be extended to Wales as well. OK.
Nicola Sturgeon said this week, in fact, that she'll make a decision later on this year on whether or not to hold another independence referendum. If she does, the British government will certainly tell her she can't have one, at least until after the next Scottish election. They've made that quite clear. Would you back the British government in that?
Well, it's not a case of whether I back the British government or not. I am there to represent the interests of the Scottish Labour Party, and we've been absolutely clear that we do not see the case, you know, within a matter of just a couple of years of a second independence referendum. The people were asked their views in 2014, and they gave a very clear answer. So I'm absolutely firm on the question of whether there should be a second independence referendum or not. There should not be. There is no case for it.
Nicola Sturgeon says she has a manifesto in the she has a mandate from the manifesto in the 2016 Scottish elections, and that runs until 2021. And the issue is that she should have. I'm not saying, I know you're against the referendum, but that the Scottish government should have the right to call one. That's what I'm asking you about.
Well, she put before the Scottish Parliament in the spring of last year the proposition that there should be a second independence referendum. And that sparked a real polarisation of opinion in Scotland. I mean, I have never witnessed...
Okay.
I've never
I want to move on from this.
Well, I've never witnessed since the days of Margaret Thatcher a political leader that was so divisive because of that call that she had made for a second independence referendum. And that's why I think the SNP have been forced to roll back from it.
When the SNP, if the SNP say we're going to have another referendum and the British government says, no, you're not, from the sound of it, you're on the side of the British government. Well,
it's not a case of me being on the side of the British government. I am opposed to a second independence referendum because I can't see there being sufficient material change to call for this second referendum when it was undertaken that it would be a once-in-a-generation opportunity for people to vote. And I think we need to move on from the Scottish independence referendum question.
In a budget debate last week, called by your own party, your finance spokesperson, James Kelly, denounced what he said was £700 million of cuts to councils planned in the Scottish budget. But when he was asked to explain how you, Labour, would raise £700 million in addition to the money that the Scottish government plans to raise by putting taxes up, he didn't seem to have a clue. Can you enlighten us?
Well, we will be enlightening you and the rest of the people of Scotland in the course of the next 10 days. I mean, the stage one debate on the Scottish draft budget takes place a week on Wednesday. But what I can say to you this morning, Gordon, is that we will undertake to put forward our plans on how we would.
What are they? Why is it a secret?
Well, I mean, it's not all entirely a secret, is it? I mean, you know, I've been on record, for example, as saying that I think the additional penny on the top rate of income tax is a woefully timid approach. There needs to be a much more ambitious approach to the top rate of taxation. And it was no secret in our manifesto in 2016, we said that the top rate ought to be 50 pence in the pound. So that I think is a reasonable proposition.
Are you still in favour of putting a penny on the basic rate? Because that's not Jeremy Corbyn's policy. It was Scottish Labour's policy until you became leader. Are you still in favour of that? Or would you prefer to do what Jeremy Corbyn wants to do, which is to put all the onus on higher rate taxpayers?
Well, without revealing too much about the plan in advance of our announcement of it, the number of high wealth individuals in Scotland is less than it is in other parts of the UK or less than the UK as a whole. So therefore, it's our empirical observation that we simply cannot look alone to people on the top rate of earnings to fill the whole of that gap. But I've also said as well that we have...
I'm completely confused now. You are saying you're in favour of putting a penny in the basic rate?
No, I'm saying that we need to look beyond simply the top rate of income tax. And one of the things which I think is worth examining is the case for a wealth tax. and we've set up a tax and investment commission, which will look at that as an idea, because one of the features of the society we live in has been a massive increase, not just in income inequality, but in wealth inequality.
Right.
And I think it's duty bound on us as a party which is in favour of redistribution, which is in favour of equality, to address that question of wealth inequality.
Kezia Dugdale, you reprimanded her for going off to Australia to appear in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. She appears to have kept 40,000 of the 45,000 she received from that. Another 5,000 has gone to charity. If and when you're on Strictly Come Dancing, would you give all the proceeds to charity, or indeed the party? And do you think she should have done that?
Well, I think that's a hypothetical question, because there's not much chance of me appearing on any celebrity programme, whether it's dancing on ice or dancing on board.
So you can give me the real answer now. Do you think she should have given all the money to charity or the party?
Look, I think that's a decision for her to make, and people will judge her based upon that.
All right, Richard Leonard, don't rule yourself out. You know, never rule yourself out.
Have you seen me dance?
Well, maybe the nation wants to see you dance. Right, well,